Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to the writing process. Oh man, where do we begin when we start to figure out what we're going to write about? So, this section is applying pre-writing models, right? So, we're going to talk about that. I love writing. Writing is my favorite thing in regards to education and academic teaching. So, I'm looking forward to teaching you how to write in an effective way, and then how to write in the right format. APA. I think it's super simple to use. There's a lot of different elements to it that I'm going to help you with, and you're going to learn a lot in this class over the next few weeks. So, what are some pre-writing strategies to help us narrow down a topic and find an area of focus? So, steps in a writing process are, of course, pre-writing, outlining the structure and ideas, writing a rough draft, revisiting and revising, and then editing your rough draft. So, moving through a little quickly, applying pre-writing models. Pre-writing is ultimately, and I'm going to teach you how to write effectively. So some of what's in the book is going to be in your homework. However, I'm going to teach you some different strategies as well. You want to know what topic you're going to write about, what interests you. And if you have to research a topic, that's totally fine. The first thing that you want to do is find a topic. Once you find a topic, you want to read a little bit about that topic and understand what you're trying to write about. So if you're talking about healthcare, and maybe you want to talk about inpatient healthcare, and you don't have a specific item in inpatient healthcare you want to talk about yet, you need to narrow that topic down. So how about I talk about stroke patients in acute healthcare settings. So stroke patients in acute healthcare settings. And then I've narrowed down my topic and I can research based on that continuum. Or you could do it on something else for that matter. Maybe length of stay in acute settings. It could be a variety of different things. So find your topic. That's the first thing. So this talks about when selecting a topic, of course, make it something that you have experience with, or something that interests you. A lot of times you're not going to have either one of those, so you're just going to have to do research and find a way to come through with this. Free writing, you could do this. A lot of people do. I don't do it as much. I would rather use my time for the next section, which is creating an outline. Do an outline. This is a really cool idea map. Take a look at it. It's just a way to navigate, like we talked about, healthcare, acute care, stroke patients, or length of stay. You can do this with a variety of different ways, and this is just one way to narrow down topics. Let's move on to the outlining process, which is great. So as we move through this, you're going to learn how to outline your paper. So when you write, you need to organize your ideas, right? So part of that is understanding how to structure your paper in a way that makes sense. And it should be in a variety of different fashions. The first fashion should be your chronological order, your spatial order, or your order of importance. And I'm going to teach you how to write in an effective way that comes not just with chronological, but chronological, spatial, or order of importance will be in the body of your paper. What we're going to have to look at when we're writing a paper is organize it in a way that makes sense for the reader. Really quickly about thesis statements. You don't always need a thesis statement depending on what you're writing about, but sometimes you do. So understand what a thesis statement is, and make sure you have that if it's something that the paper is called for. However, it's not something that's always necessary, but make sure you're aware, of course, for a test. So these are some thesis statements. So music piracy would be one topic, and a thesis statement for that would be the recording industry fears that so-called music piracy will diminish profits and destroy the market. When we're talking about acute healthcare settings, maybe stroke patients in acute healthcare settings, you could say research shows without effective care, stroke patients in healthcare settings can diminish in regards to their activities of daily living. And that would be an example of that. Let's move on to an actual formal outline, and we'll talk about that in a second. Page 398 in your book, and there's a section that shows types of headers in your paper, and it says introduction, and it has the body of your paper, which talks about ebooks and the way that people read, and then more in the body of your paper that talks about film camera replacement by digital cameras, and then finally the conclusion. So This is how your paper should always look. You have an introduction, you have the body of your paper, which is the bulk of your information, and you have a conclusion. Your introduction is an intro to your paper. The body of your paper talks about the specifics of the meat of your paper, and then the conclusion goes over your specifics one more time for the reader so that they better understand it. When you add some information to this, you also at times have an abstract. An abstract is an overview of your paper. So when it's published one day, potentially, that's something that people look at in order to understand what your paper is about. A lot of time on drafting. So when you draft your paper, you just start writing. Part of that is understanding what you're writing about, doing research on your topic, making sure you're aware of the significance of your topic, and understanding where information comes from the perspective of what you're researching. So where did you get the information? Making sure you cite that correctly, which we'll talk about in the future, but really understanding where and how things originate. And then you can start writing about it. And editing a paper is something that just takes time and experience. Part of this is having the ability to read your paper and understand what you're writing about. In this section, you can see there's some information on transitional words and phrases. A lot of this consists of, just basic English skills in regards to writing, and it takes time. So writing a paper is not an act that you can just pick up and do one time and be great at it. It takes a lot of writing, and that's not something that I'm going to really penalize you on. We're going to work on that together. But your word frequency, if you use a word a repeated number of times in a paper, that's not as effective as using transitional words and using a thesaurus to have different types of phrases that might really help your paper flow in a positive way. Take a look at this section. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it here in the lecture, but this is not test question material, but transitional words and phrases are helpful as we continue to write and learn how to write effectively. I would assume a lot of you in this class know how to write, and you can make sure that your paper sounds and flows in a way that's easy to understand. So the key terms for Chapter 11 are conclusion, revise, edit, unity, coherence, transitions, and peer review. A peer review, really quickly, and I don't want to miss out on that. A peer review is something that's, I think, effective from the perspective of someone else reviews your work and gives you feedback based on its how it's written and based on the research that you've done. Peer-reviewed articles are articles that we'll need to use in our upcoming research paper. They're easy to find. You go to Google Scholar, you can get that information. Peer-reviewed articles are something that's been drafted by a researcher and then been chosen as an effective research paper or information based on the research that was done. So it's been looked at by a variety of different people, or maybe a group of people that says, hey, this paper is legit, it's correct information. So let's move on to Chapter 12. Writing an essay from start to finish. Chapter 11 is pretty long, but we're moving into Chapter 12 on page 427. So for the specifics, we're going to talk about developing a strong and clear thesis statement, which we already kind of talked about. So the sentence that kind of talks about why you're here to begin with, what you're writing about. Not going to spend a lot of time on that because it's not something that I often focus on with students. However, it's something that can be effective if you're learning how to draft a paper from the perspective of your topic. So working thesis statement, you can change your thesis statement over time. So maybe it starts with hospitals and acute care settings where stroke patients, if we don't care for them properly, it affects their activities of daily living. And maybe it also affects their life expectancy. Maybe there's another element to that you can work on, and that's a working thesis statement. Understand the thesis statement, you want to move into writing your couple of paragraphs in your paper. Here's how I would do it. So make sure you have your primary support, the main points of your thesis based on research, right? The majority of the time, unless it's not a research-based paper. And then you're going to look at a topic sentence. So you're going to go to your outline and what you've outlined in bullet points. So if you want to talk about hospitals or healthcare, you need to first outline what healthcare is, right? Healthcare is how we provide care for patients. Where do you provide care for patients at? A hospital setting, an outpatient setting? What's one of the challenges in in providing healthcare for patients. Uh, so we talked about hospital setting, that's an acute care setting, same thing. What type of care is seen in acute care settings? So just bullet point that out and write brief sentences on each side. And you're going to have topic sentences, and then you're going to add supporting details under those topic sentences, and then you're going to have the body of your paper like we talked about. Now this is just the body, it's not the introduction or the conclusion, which can be different from each perspective. So as we move through, that is an interesting area where you can just formulate your paper a little bit easier. How do you organize your writing? We talked about that. Chronological order, order of importance. Most of the time I ask for order of importance. So chronological is going to be difficult in a research paper. However, if it's something that you're looking at from a time continuum, you can do that. I like order of importance because it's persuading and convincing. It's ranking items by their importance or benefit, and then it's illustrating a solution, a problem, and a situation. So take a look at this. You can write in any fashion that you want. However, I think order of importance is usually the easiest. As we transition to looking a little bit more, because we've talked about this already, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. You can research that yourself. Let's move on to writing introductory and concluding paragraphs. This is a great segue from the body, like we talked about, right, to the introduction and conclusion. We talked about the introduction being a generic establishing structure where you talk about what your paper has in it. So establish your voice and tone, attitude towards the subject. What are you wanting to talk about here? What's the general topic of the essay? What's the general topic of the paper? What's going to be in the body of your paper? And then what's your thesis statement? So if you're doing a research paper, most of the time, like we talked about, there is a thesis statement. It's not always necessary, but it talks about explicitly, hey, what's going to be in the body of my paper? What am I researching here? And what is my topic about? This is exactly what I think about in regards to writing. The funnel technique, broad statement, general introduction remarks, and then what is your thesis? I actually can flip this over, and when I talk about writing, I look at it from the perspective of a triangle, right? So introduction is on the left side, in the middle is your body of your paper, and then your conclusion is on this side. So there's a lot of different elements you can look at from the perspective of writing here. I'm going to move pretty quickly because I want to show you Google Scholar really quick, where we find some awesome research to start looking how to write a paper. So you can get personally involved in regards to writing an introduction and concluding paragraphs. So the conclusion is going to be, hey, I wrote my introduction, you know the body of my paper, it's a summary. The conclusion is a summary, the introduction is an introduction to your theme or what you're writing about, your thesis. So as we transition out, some of the key takeaways from this and key terms, look at those, and I'm going to transition really quickly in the next couple of minutes that we have to look at Google Scholar. You're going to really enjoy this. An interesting way to use your library account with PMI is you can actually put it in Google Scholar. So if you need help with that, click on My Library and input your information, and I can help you as well. So if we're going to look at healthcare, let's take a look at healthcare in Google Scholar, right? You just type in Google Scholar, healthcare. Your time frame from where you want to look at research is on your left side, which is really helpful. And this is all material that is on the internet and in different libraries. So I'm going to say healthcare since 2020. So there's a lot of different information in here. NFTs, of course, we don't want to look at that. How about healthcare administration? So from the perspective of healthcare administration, if I look on the right side here, if it says PDF, it's a free article. I can click on that and the whole article comes up. Another really cool thing, if I find something that I want to use, you can also cite your material here. And we use APA, which we'll talk about more in regards to how we cite material. But you just copy and paste it into your paper, and that is how you cite your sources. Super helpful, super easy to use. Google Scholar is so easy because it's right there. Of course, Google has a great search engine, so it's easy to find information like we talked about. How about we talked about stroke patients? Tons of information on stroke patients, tons of information on acute health care. There's a lot of great things that you can learn and you can find out from Google Scholar. This is where I would start. If you have a topic, start researching here so you can develop that thesis as we talked about, or develop the introduction, move on to your body, and then end with your conclusion. Thanks so much. Hope you enjoyed these chapters.